This time on the Brothers Mysterium.
An interesting story. It is a huge urban legend, and unfortunately it is not true.
And she would claim she could see, like, ghosts, like dead people, like walking around the cemetery.
Just started getting weird behavior. They're traveling, they don't know where they're going, they're trying to commit suicide together.
And it looks like, damn, this happens all the time.
Right.
But you're omitting all the times that it doesn't happen.
As soon as I tap it, boom, light went out, and we were both like, what the heck? My brother and I have always been intrigued by the unexplainable. Like many, we're fascinated with stories of the supernatural, fringe science, and modern-day mysteries.
Though we've seen no first-hand proof of its existence, our minds remain open to the possibility.
Unsatisfied with the so-called evidence on television and the internet, we are choosing to take matters into our own hands and conduct our own interviews and research.
Now we're on a quest to speak with as many people as we can and hear the stories of these events from those who have lived them.
No Hollywood effects or exaggerations, and no hidden agenda. We invite you to listen and decide what and who you believe.
We are the Brothers Mysterium.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Mysterium. My name is Tommy, as if you didn't know. My brother's name is Eric.
Ayo.
And now it's time to start the show. We are the Brothers Mysterium, and we only exist because of you, the fans. Our loyal listeners out there, you've made us the #1 paranormal podcast on the planet. We appreciate it. And if you truly love us, you will rate and review this podcast on whatever podcast provider you use. Give us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/The Brothers Mysterium. Follow us on Twitter and or Instagram at Mysterium Bros. And reach out to us. Let us know what you think of the show, about experiences you've had, topics you want us to discuss, either by direct messaging us through any of those avenues or directly at thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com. Which is a perfect segue into today's show, our listener Q&A Part 2.
The Brothers Mysterium 2 and a Part 2.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a while since we did a Q&A from the listeners. It's kind of a hodgepodge, just random thoughts, topics people want the Mysterium take on, and yeah, it's long overdue.
Yeah, it's kind of like almost like a collection of our reaction videos, except these topics are not so recent necessarily. They don't have to be. But we kind of just, see what people are curious about and throw our 10 cents out there, if you will.
Exactly. A little free-flowing discussion. We might not have all of the first-hand accounts as our usual episodes, but it's cool to sometimes hit up these one-off topics that normally we wouldn't discuss.
And actually, I also learn about some interesting topics that are kind of off the supernatural beaten path, if you will. Like sometimes people email about things that I've never heard of, and I'm sure a lot of people listening haven't even heard of. So it's always cool to kind of get something fresh and new in there because, ghosts are cool, but they're ghosts and, how cool can they really get?
That's true. It is hard to grasp a ghost.
Right.
Physically and mentally sometimes.
Yeah.
Theoretically. But yeah, it is cool. And that's kind of what we've focused in on. The collection of questions we've taken are a little bit outside of the supernatural, but more into the sort of these phenomena that occur that are a little bit unexplained. So the first thing I will say is we did get a Facebook post from John F. who said, even though you're headquartered back east, I'd like to hear about ghosts of the Old West. So just a call out to our listeners, if anybody out there has a legend, has a place we should investigate, or they have a story from the Old West, the Wild West, even west of the Mississippi, because we are based in the Northeast, but we like to make our fans happy. So if anybody out there listening has a good story, a good firsthand experience, as I said before, email us, message us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we'll try to make that happen for John F. But why don't we kick it off here with an email we received from Tyson S., and he wanted to know what our thoughts are on streetlight interference. So for those unaware, SLI, as it's also referred to, that term comes from paranormal author Hilary Evans. It is the ability, or supposed ability, I should say, of individuals who have the power to turn off streetlights or other types of security lights, usually outdoors, but it can also happen inside, and they do it with merely their presence. So they are not able to, like, we'll say Eleven from Stranger Things can focus her mind and make things happen. It's more of just they're out, they're casually walking, and as they pass under streetlights, they flicker out. And it happens to them, supposedly on a regular basis, more frequently than chance could explain or account for. And it's interesting because this actually happened to me somewhat recently. Went under a streetlight, it went out.
Whoa.
Right as I got underneath it, the timing was perfect, and for a second I got excited, and I said, there's like 5 more streetlights, baby.
Hit them all up.
Is this going to keep happening? Did not happen. Did not happen again.
No.
It is bizarre. It's one of these things that sounds kind of weird, kind of dumb at first, but I guess I always say if so many people are experiencing it, that there's a paranormal author out there, Hilary Evans, writing about it, giving it a name. It's such a phenomenon that multiple people have had the experience so much that they're convinced that it's true. It does make you wonder, and then it bleeds into other areas, at least in my mind, like, we do have electromagnetism in our body. Could it be possible? Does somebody have such a charge on them that their mere presence passing under a light has the ability to turn it off? What are your initial thoughts?
I've heard stories like this before, actually, so this isn't a new one to me. And I remember the person who told it to me was, and I don't like bashing people, but I think it's relevant to kind of putting this one in proper perspective.
We always keep it real, so if he was an idiot, say he was an idiot.
Well, he wasn't an idiot, but he was the kind of person that wanted to be special. You know what I mean? Like
yes.
Wanted to believe like he was like, I wouldn't say like the chosen one or something like that, but
he was like an X-Man.
Right. And like he said, like I remember him telling me that like, well, sometimes when I walk under streetlights, they go out. And I just thought like, I mean, that's happened to me a couple times, enough so that I remember, obviously
right.
Not specific times, but it's like seeing a shooting star to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm sure it's happened to a lot of people at times, but
right. It's like, oh, that was cool. It happened, and then if I look back, it's like, yeah, I know it happened, but I can't say when or whatever. It's just a thing that happens sporadically. And I think this person was describing it to me due to their kind of like need to be more than everyone else and kind of special. I feel like the story I had heard was exaggerated.
Yeah, that happens a lot too.
Yeah. And then also of my classic example that I always go to is if you're aware of this, it almost becomes like the, wait a second, don't say it, the Bader-Meinhof effect in a way, where you're going to notice it every time it happens. And then if you want to spin it the other way, the Gene Dixon effect, you're not going to remember the times that it doesn't happen. So therefore, you're now culminating a kind of false catalog of all the times it has happened. And it looks like, damn, this happens all the time.
Right.
But you're omitting all the times that it doesn't happen, which is probably more often than not. Like if you really did like a, percentage wise here, I'm pretty sure like the times it happens would be in the low range.
I would say you are probably correct. It actually brings to mind a dude I used to work with, a great guy, good friend of mine, known as Luscious Johnny. We used to take walks around the building, midday, and it wasn't a street light, but there was this outdoor external light, kind of like a security light, I guess, above a metal door, kind of on the back side of the building. And I remember we're walking once, and I reached over and I tapped. There was like a little sign on the door. As soon as I tap it, boom, light went out, and we were both like, "What the heck?" So I tapped it again. Obviously, we both kind of knew there wasn't like a light switch hidden under the sign under the door. Tapped it again, nothing happened. And then every time we'd walk around the building, as we passed it, I would touch it. Never happened again. But we always remembered, and a small part of me was always like, what if I touch the door? But as you said, it's stupid. I touched that door every time since then, and it only happened that one initial time. So that's some true life sort of experiences. It's also important to note, SLI has never been demonstrated to occur in a scientific experiment. So when they try to get a control, a variable, bring it into a laboratory, and really get the science, the hard science behind it, cannot be demonstrated. As we said, people cannot reproduce it at will. So even if, say, your friend who said this happens to me, if we were to say, okay, hey, we got a video camera, we got all these scientists, we have all these instruments to measure the electromagnetism and everything, he can't control it. It's sort of luck / good timing.
Right.
And other people, though, who do believe, say it's not your body's electric current or whatever. They say it is more like, I said before, 11 from Stranger Things. They say it's more that you have some kind of psychic telekinetic energy that you're emitting, maybe unconsciously, which is what is knocking out the light. Now, I will say that a lot of these lights go through what's called cycling. They have like fail modes, especially high pressure sodium street lights and other lights will just click off, basically, which is why a lot of times you just see like a street light flicker and shut off and then it's back on.
Right.
So as far as this goes, I'm going to say it is probably not a real phenomenon where people are actually able to be responsible for these shutting off. I think you nailed it when you said they remember the times that it does happen. They forget all the times they've walked under street lights or any light and nothing has happened.
Right.
So it's more a creation in their mind.
And also, it's like, what is the, I don't want to say purpose of that, but like what does that, I don't know, like it doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day. It's like just street lights. Like it's not, does this happen with other lights everywhere? You know what I'm saying? So I think people are very,
right.
The idea they have about it happening with streetlights is unrealistically selective. Like if you were emitting this aura, you would, you know, your microwave might turn on, or your kitchen lights might flash, or any other light that is, putting out a light at the same frequency, or, you know, whatever, it would be affected the same way.
Yeah.
So like the streetlight thing to me, it's just so like arbitrary. And I think people just kind of, like you said, like the way they cycle, I think people kind of like single that out as like, yeah, that's something special I can do.
Right. Yeah. It's almost too specific. Like your mutant power, if you were an X-Man, is you can emit an electric frequency that only will affect streetlights.
Yeah.
I mean, some people did say it could be other security lights and stuff, but it is called SLI, street light interference. So that's the main one. It does make me wonder about, like, there's other offshoots about electromagnetism, like electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS, is the claim some people have, where electromagnetic fields give them negative physical symptoms. And I don't know if you watch Better Call Saul.
I do not.
Oh, great show. Spin-off of Breaking Bad, but a character in that has it where basically he has to live in a house with no electricity. He has to hide under like space blankets to block it out.
Right, so with the lights out, you don't feel them.
If the current's not flowing, no.
Oh, sorry about the exit signs. I guess they couldn't kill those for you.
Well, they're not drawing much current and they're far away. Intensity drops off with distance per the inverse square law.
Okay, whoa, inverse square, I'm not a physicist. Could you dumb that down a shade for me?
The farther away it is, the stronger the source needs to be to have an effect.
And this is a real condition people have. It is believed to be psychosomatic, but if any light is on, even if they're unaware of it, if somebody has a cell phone in their presence or in the room with them, they say, oh, I'm getting a headache, I'm feeling sick. And that's another interesting connection to me as far as like...
You going with the TV thing?
What TV thing is that?
Were you going to say an interesting connection to you, where like you can walk in a room and you can tell if there's an electronic device on?
No, I think that's more just like good hearing.
I think so too. And not even hearing, but like almost like just like, yeah, I don't know. It sounds stupid to say auditory sensation, because that is hearing.
Right.
But yeah, it's like you can just feel like this vibe.
Yeah. Like, we have talked about that before, right? If the TV is on or something, I'll definitely be like, hold on, what is that? And go and find like somebody left their whatever dehumidifiers humming in the basement. But
yeah, usually it's a TV or something.
Yeah, these people will say it's actually like physically harming them, and they'll live almost like hermits and not let anybody with any electric thing near them. But it's psychosomatic. There's no real medical diagnosis of that, but it kind of connects again where maybe it's something where it's more the human being's interpretation of what's happening rather than a real stimulus affecting them. Or with these streetlights, they're not affecting the light. It's just happening. And like, speaking of X-Men and electromagnetism and magnetism, as a kid, I remember always being shocked when watching Unsolved Mysteries or whatever, where those people were like magnet people. They were human, had human magnetism, or they were called human magnets, and they would like stick pots and pans and hammers to their heads. You ever see these people?
Yeah.
A Georgian man has set a new record for magnetic body attraction. The 41-year-old sports coach balanced 53 spoons on his chest and back, breaking his own world record after previously balancing 50 spoons in 2011. He was even able to walk around without any of the spoons falling off. It's not just spoons which stick to his body either. He can also attract metal sheets to his chest and pull along a car. But he doesn't plan to stop there.
When the time comes, I'm going to move airplanes, then empty train carriages, something like this. I won't play all my cards at once.
The kickboxing trainer only discovered he had the ability to stick metal objects to his skin a couple of years ago, and it's not known how or why his body is able to do it.
So that I always thought was like, wow, that's a real life Magneto. But our good buddy James Randi has said that that's probably just friction. The people that claim to do that usually have very smooth, hairless skin. He says when someone's sticking a hammer to their head, they're kind of leaning back. It's more of like a carny street, like at a fair, I don't want to say like sideshow act, but he thinks it's more of that. He has done tests where when he put talc on objects.
I'm going to ask the challengers to put the powder on their hands and on their chests and then make the objects stay there.
They would not stick to the person. If the person really was magnetic and had magnetic skin, it would stick to them regardless through magnetism.
Right.
But
you'd think it would. Yeah.
We know first it's not magnetic, so it must be some other kind of energy. And talcum powder is not going to interfere with electricity or any other kind of energy. One thing is certain. It's not psychic power.
Yeah, but there are some interesting things and abilities that people have as far as the ability to turn off streetlights with their mere presence. I do not really think such a thing exists.
Nor I.
Shall we move on to our next topic? As we were just discussing, when you walk into a house, sometimes you hear a hum. Pamela on Twitter sent us a tweet and said, "What do you make of the hum?" For those of you unaware, the hum, as it's called, is a phenomenon involving widespread reports, this is all across the world, of people hearing a persistent and invasive low-frequency hum, kind of a droning sound, kind of modulates. Some people, most people, hear nothing, but these people, they call themselves hearers, say they hear it all the time, and there's a lot of interesting aspects to this. You can Google it and hear a supposed example of it. Some people claim they were able to record it. Other people just kind of say this is what it sounds like. It's most widely reported, usually in the UK and the US. There's specific hums, the Bristol hum, the Windsor hum, the Taos hum. And what's interesting is some people hear the hum only in buildings as opposed to being outside.
Okay.
Some people say they actually feel a vibration almost in their temporal lobe or in their body. And others even describe having inner ear pain. They say they've used earplugs. It does nothing. They're just always hearing it.
I mean, if it's that low of a frequency, it would affect your body. The higher tones that would be embedded in it would be blocked out by the earplugs, but like the lower tones would definitely get to your body,
Yeah. According to certain studies, about 2% of people in a specific area where these hums are big can hear it. So about 2%, not a lot of people. It seems to be possible for these hearers to move away from it. So if you're moving away from, whatever you live in this town, you're always hearing it. You go on vacation, they say they hear it a little bit less. So there is some sort of center to it where the noise is emitting. Both men and women hear it equally. It's not exclusive to one sex or the other, but people of middle age seem to hear it the most. So age does appear to be a factor. It's very interesting. It makes me wonder a few things. Well, there's a couple possible explanations. Some people say it could be mechanical. In some instances, it has proven that if there's a substation nearby, there's a transformer, there actually is a source for the sound, but in that case, usually everyone in town will hear it and they'll do something to muffle the noise, obviously. Other times, it's just somebody has tinnitus, a ringing of the ear. If you've ever left a loud rock show, you have that ringing in your ear. Although they describe this as not a ringing, it's more of that deep modulating hum.
Yeah.
Some doctors say it could be spontaneous autoacoustic emission, which is SOAE, which basically is noises happening within your own ear. So people who do hear these, typically that's more of a faint hissing, almost like a cicada sound or a buzzing or a ringing. But that could be a cause, and other times it has been proven to be animals. Like some people will say, I hear this, and it ends up they have like a wasp's nest in their wall. Or there's these types of sort of sonic fish, like the toadfish or the midshipman fish, and their mating call is sort of this low sound. But that seems to be very, very rare. Normally these people hear it, they're not near sonic fish, there are no wasps. And they say they just hear it all the time. It makes them kind of crazy. They hear it day or night. Some people describe it as like a diesel engine that's just idling. So I could see it definitely driving you a little batty to always have to hear this weird sound. And then skeptics say it's more of a psychological, kind of like we were just saying with streetlight interference and hypermagnetism and sensitivities. They're saying it's more psychological. It's people maybe focusing on these drony sounds. If it is traffic, if it's something, is it more of psychosomatic, it's in their own mind? Cognitive behavioral therapy has been shown to sort of help decrease it. So it's interesting. It's, I don't really know. Could there be some sort of a really low frequency emitting from the earth that only certain people can hear? I guess it's possible.
Yeah.
I've never heard the hum. I don't hear it now. What about you? Ever heard a hum?
No. I mean, I have definitely experienced tinnitus, as I am a fan of loud heavy metal music, and I am a drummer, and I used to play at shows and things like that, and I used to go to a lot of concerts, so yeah, I'm familiar with tinnitus.
Yeah.
The hum I've never experienced, and I'm trying to think, like, there may have been instances in my life where I have kind of picked up on this weird frequency, but I feel like it's always been, so for instance, okay, actually last week, I went kayaking down the Delaware River, and there was a section where we came underneath power lines. And my buddy was like, stop, everyone be quiet and listen. And you could hear the voltage going through the power lines. And it was like a good, like 30, 40 yards up at least.
Yeah.
So, and you could literally, you could hear it. And he's like, that's not even that bad. Like he was an electrician for a while. So he said, he's like, that's really nothing. Like sometimes there's like lines that carry higher voltage that really, really hum. So I would say it's more likely than not, like you're saying, like some kind of mechanical thing or electrical system, something that people are picking up on and kind of misperceiving. It's as the great Christopher Hitchens said, people will take a conspiracy theory over no theory, meaning people would rather assign some kind of supernatural or otherworldly origin to something rather than accept it as being unexplainable.
Indeed.
So I don't know. In this case, I would say I think it's most likely some kind of actual disturbance that's bothering somebody.
So then, just to play devil's advocate, let's say that there is a big transformer in town. How come only 2% of the people would then hear it all the time and others wouldn't? Do you think they maybe just have better hearing or the ability to hear lower frequencies?
Well, besides me, how many other people do you know that can do the there's a TV on in the room trick?
Yeah, not too many, but I guess so we can account that for maybe different people hear differently.
Right.
What if you live in a town where there is no generator, there is no mechanical, or there's no sonic fish mating calls? What if you're living in a town that does not have a mechanical explanation? Also, like some people, you could say like, well, it's the power lines, but what if you don't live near power lines? And then how come they hear it all the time? I guess if they go away, it would go away and the power's always running. But like, what if you remove that source and people still hear it? Because some people have said they've purposely gone away where they said it has gotten quieter, but other people say it's consistent. So if you leave your town I don't know, like how far people have gone, but say you like leave New Jersey and go to California, do you still hear it? I guess I'm just creating my own scenarios now. But
I feel like it could then be in your head. It could be a completely psychological or physiological thing. I mean, you could have, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but you could have a tumor or something like that. You never know.
Yeah, that's true.
But
yeah, I guess it could be more subjective too. It's like some people like to sit by the ocean and it's nice and you don't mind hearing waves. And I'm sure other people are like, why is it so loud? Oh gosh, it's making me crazy. Let's get out of here. So maybe it's how the person interprets the sound.
Right. And again, also, maybe I'm just in a pessimistic mood today. I don't know. But I also knew someone in college who I think I've told this story before, go to cemeteries with, and she would claim she could see like ghosts, like dead people, like walking around the cemetery. And she would say like, there's one, and like point. And I was legitimately open-minded about it. And I was like, where? Like where? Like I'm trying to see it. I don't see it. And like now I know like she was totally bullshitting me. And again, it's that like that desire to appear special or have an ability, that X-Man thing. So I believe there's probably also people who have heard of the hum and now are like, yeah, I'm psychologically or psychically in tune with it. I hear the hum.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'll like I said, I'll never put it past someone to generate a good story.
Yeah.
And try and pass it off as true.
And that's an interesting take, because between the terrible X-Men abilities of being able to turn off streetlights by walking under them, or being one of the few who can hear a sound that makes you crazy and irritable, both bad powers.
Yeah, this is the episode of crappiest superheroes of all time.
Yeah. The hum, I would say, intrigues me more than the streetlight interference, just because there seems to be something going on there, but what it is, I don't know.
I feel like science could probably, if I mean, obviously people have to be, selective about what they want to research and things like that with money and all that. But I feel like if this was a really big phenomenon, some scientific group would have pinpointed it by now. You know what I'm saying? Or had like seismographs that show this hum. But
yeah, maybe just not enough of the population is being affected.
Right.
Yet.
Yeah.
Let's move along, because Adrian R. sent us a direct message, private message on Facebook, asking if we could discuss Rudolph Fentz, F-E-N-T-Z. So those of you unfamiliar with this tale, supposedly around mid-June 1951, like 11:15 p.m., New York City, a man with mutton chop sideburns, Victorian-style clothing suddenly just appears in Times Square.
What the hell is this?
Witnesses were startled. He was not there before. Suddenly, this man, who clearly is out of time, is standing there.
Nonsense.
Bam! Hit by a car. Killed. Everybody rushes over. They get the police. The police come over. They go through this man's very old Victorian-style clothing. What they find is 19th century money, a letter dated 1876, and business cards with his name, Rudolph Fentz. None of the items show any signs of aging, so it's not like he had collected 19th century money in an old letter. It was all fresh, new. The police looked up his name and they were able to track down Miss Rudolph Fentz. She was the widow of a Rudolph Fentz Jr., and the story went that Jr.'s dad had disappeared all of a sudden mysteriously in 1876. So people were left to assume that his dad had time traveled into New York City, where he was then killed by a car.
Ziggity dog, ziggity boo, what she do to me?
An interesting story. It is a huge urban legend, and unfortunately, it is not true.
What?
Yeah, apparently it was huge in the 80s, went away, and then in the 90s, when message boards and the internet kind of blew up, it once again came back, and there's still articles and all this stuff about this time-traveling man, and this is one of the few cases where somebody was real and he was hit by a car, and there were all these different theories. But people who did some real digging were able to find the origin of this name, this story. It's a short story called I'm Scared It's from 1951, and it was by the science fiction writer Jack Finney, who also wrote Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Ooh, nice. That sounds like a pretty good story. I mean, I haven't read it, but I'm going to. But like, I like the premise.
Yeah, it's a cool story. I like that he was instantly killed, hit by a car. You know, that way he doesn't say anything like, war's coming, World War III.
Right.
You know, it's kind of believable. It's New York City. All these people saw it. But
right.
To answer Adrian, as far as discussing it, I always like when these things do have a true source. We can look it up. It's been proven. This was a short story that was written before the urban legend of it ever blew up. And obviously the time doesn't really match, since the story was written before people like knew about it. If like in 1845 there was a letter or a police report, then we would say, well, somebody heard about it and then wrote the story. But in this case, kind of like Slender Man, we were able to track down the origin of the legend. So it's cool, it's interesting, but I don't think he was a real time traveler. Now, there is another famous time traveler you might have heard of. John Titor.
I think it's pronounced Teeter.
That's not the sexy way I like to pronounce it. Oh, Lord. And he blew up in about 2000, 2001, showed up on message boards all over the internet, posting claims that he was an American military time traveler from the year 2036. He would make vague predictions, but some specific ones as well, regarding events that were going to happen in 2004 and beyond, such as a nuclear war. None of them came true, but he gained a ton of fame. People were really impressed by the detail that this guy was giving, he was posting. So that's another kind of self-claimed time traveler that sort of has internet fame, we'll call it. But again, I don't really put too much claim in who he was. There were a lot of inconsistencies in his explanations of what the future was like and his predictions. So somebody actually, a private investigator, really dug into this and was able to find out it was all an elaborate hoax, because a 2009 investigation concluded that the person behind John Titor, is that how you say it?
I say Teeter.
Teeter.
It might be tighter. I don't know.
Jeez, so that's the most confusing part of this mystery. But anyway, he was likely the creation of Larry Haber, a Florida entertainment lawyer, along with his brother Maury, a computer scientist. So we're the Brothers Mysterium. I guess the Haber brothers are the brothers Hoax, who created this time traveler. There you have it.
Indeed, yeah.
So I guess we could quickly touch on time travel. I always like to quote the third Brother Mysterium, who we should at some point get on this show, our older brother Dan, who once said, time travel doesn't exist, because if it did, I would have already came back and told myself.
Yes. Always taking the route of him being the center of the action, as much as I love him.
Of course.
Like, he thinks that time travel doesn't exist because he would be the one to go back and pass the message on to himself.
Yes, although what if it was invented after he had passed away?
Well, right.
Although, yeah. I mean, who knows? I'll have to call him and ask him to break that down. But
yeah,
time travel, I mean, time can bend, space can bend. Thank you, Einstein, relativity. But can we travel through time? I don't know. Some people say as we travel faster, time physically slows down. Quantum mechanics, quantum physics. At this point, I'm going to say I do not think time travel is really possible, at least not from us human beings, as far as these stories go of people jumping through time.
Yeah, I think like the idea of like moving faster than the speed of light, or moving at the speed of light, or moving faster, does cause time to pass more slowly for you. I'm pretty sure that that's like the accepted theory of time at this moment.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen the movie Interstellar?
I have not, but I probably should.
Well, that's a good flick. I won't ruin it for you, but for those who have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And there are like very, I don't want to call them fringe, but just like not very well fleshed out theories. And some of them I think were Einstein's, certain things being able to travel backwards in time, but we're not talking about like sending a person back in time, saying like a photon or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which I don't have enough scientific information to even go any further on that. I'm just saying I've heard things like that, so I'm not going to speak on the validity of it. So I do think time travel is possible in that extent, mostly going forward in the future. Like, you know,
Yeah.
but I don't think, the old like grandfather paradox and all that. Like, I think we're a long ways away from having to worry about that kind of thing.
Yeah. And like we had discussed like the stone tape theory, which is if somebody dies in a car wreck and it's a bloody, terrible disaster, is that energy almost imprinted on that whatever dead man's curb, and now every night the car goes again. But like, is that really time travel? It's such a big, vast thing. It's hard to say. But yeah, I'll agree with you. At this point, time travel for humans, not so much.
The only like good time travel theory I think I've heard, which again is like completely out there and there's no evidence for it or anything like that, but it sounds solid even in a fictional type way, is the whole like the way we perceive 3 dimensions, and there are creatures that perceive only 2 dimensions. So, you know, if you poked a pen through a piece of paper and that creature saw it, that pen would appear out of nowhere because it would have no depth to it because they can't perceive depth. So if there were entities out there who could perceive more than 3 dimensions, they may have this ability to walk through time as if it was an up, down, left, right, back, forth kind of thing. So, I mean, again, very science fiction-y, not really anything behind it. It's all just kind of theory at this point, but still cool nonetheless.
Yeah. So moving along on the docket, next up, we got an email from Kevin who asked, what are your thoughts on the case of the Pollock Sisters?
So this is an interesting one that was brought to my attention not too long ago. So the story is that there was this family from Northumberland in England, and they're kind of living there in the 40s. So it's a mother and father, obviously. And in 1946, they have a daughter named Joanna Pollock. And then a couple years later, in 1951, they have a daughter named Jacqueline Pollock. So they have these 2 children, Joanna and Jacqueline. The 2 are inseparable. They're best friends, just like you'd imagine any 2 girls without other siblings would be. The one girl, Jacqueline, when she was about 3, she had an accident where she fell and hit her head on a bucket or something like that, which caused a small scar to appear on her forehead over her right eye, kind of like right where the nose kind of meets the eye. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's an important detail, which will come back later. So in May 1957, Joanna was 11 and Jacqueline was 6. And on the morning of May 7th, they were hit by a car and killed while walking to church with a friend.
Both of them were killed.
Both of them were killed, yeah. I don't know about the friends, but I know both sisters, Jacqueline and Joanna Pollock, were both killed. The lady driving the car was apparently suicidal. She had been legally separated from her child and decided to take like an insane amount of medication, whatever was available at the time in the 50s, and decided to pretty much go on a suicide ride and ended up killing Joanna and Jacqueline. Yeah, pretty tragic. So the father, who was kind of a religious guy, is kind of like praying a lot, and it says that, from what I read, that he was praying for like proof from God of like reincarnation and things like that. And I don't know if he meant like the post-apocalyptic reincarnation where, you know, bodies will be reunited with their souls and things like that, or if he meant like in this life, if it's possible. But I'm going to go with that he was going for in this life, which some of the things I read also said he was a little bit, had like the good old, like, they weren't Catholic, they were from Church of England, but like Catholic guilt about, like thinking thoughts about reincarnation in this life was kind of like, ooh, don't let God read those thoughts, he'll be mad.
That's a no-no.
But anyway, in 1958, so this is October 4th, 1958, about a little over a year after the accident, the mother is pregnant with twin girls, and she gives birth to them. At some point, the father did write down that he thought that the twins, when the wife was pregnant with the twins, were going to be his daughters reincarnated. So there's a little, we'll touch on that in a little bit. But anyway, so they have these 2 new girls named Jillian and Jennifer who are twins. When Jennifer is born, she has a birthmark that looks exactly like Jacqueline's scar. And
a theory I've heard many times.
Right.
Where people say if somebody had a gunshot and they're reincarnated, their kid will have like, a birthmark in that spot or something.
So Jennifer, the new girl, one of the twins, has 2 birthmarks, one that resembles Jacqueline's scar and one that resembles a birthmark that Jacqueline had. So Jennifer is very similar to Jacqueline. Okay?
Right.
And this goes on as the 2 girls grow up. So Jillian and Jennifer have access to Joanna and Jacqueline's things, because you got to remember they only died a year before, so their toys are still in the house and all that kind of stuff. And
sure,
it turns out, so like Jennifer plays with Jacqueline's toys and kind of identifies those as hers, whereas Jillian plays with Joanna's toys and kind of identifies those as hers. And the 2 have personalities, the 2 twin girls, Jillian and Jennifer, have personalities that very eerily and specifically mirror Jacqueline and Joanna, who were killed in the accident. Gets a little creepier. So, according to John, who was the father, the twins would actually talk about the accident where their sisters, who they never met, were killed. And they would kind of talk about it in the present tense, and they would have details that they obviously shouldn't have, not having been alive, or even really, by the time they were old enough to talk about these things, that, they were so far removed from the incident, you know what I'm saying? But
yeah, and it all happened, before they were in existence. So the fact they would know anything about it is disturbing.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. And obviously the theory is then that Jillian and Jennifer were the reincarnation of both Jacqueline and Joanna. And that's pretty much where the mystery kind of lies at this point.
The birthmark thing, as I mentioned, is interesting, as I have heard that before. It is not too uncommon, though, for like siblings to maybe have birthmarks in the same areas or similar ones. So it could have just been pure coincidence that the birthmark was where the scar had been and the other birthmark was where the other birthmark was. Also, it does remind me of one of the tests to choose the next Dalai Lama, who is supposedly reincarnated, is a child is presented with like 12 items, and like 6 were the previous Dalai Lamas. And if that child picks those 6 items, then they say, oh yes, similar to how you were saying, they each picked the toys of potentially their predecessor, who was their own reincarnated self. So it's interesting that they were able to identify their own belongings from their previous life.
Right.
The real weird thing to me would be, I've heard of people being reincarnated where it's like a young kid is like talking about World War II and getting super specific, and then the parents are like, this is weird, and they research it, and then they reach out to an old man from across the country, and they're like, hey, do you know Sidewinder, the code name from this mission? And he'll be like, I was Sidewinder, and my best buddy was Tilt-A-Whirl, and oh my god, how does he know this? But there's no real connection, but to have your daughter die and be reincarnated again as your daughter, like to keep it all in the family, literally, and almost like reset your offspring, your children. It's very interesting that it's such a close connection as opposed to sort of a random reincarnation. Although I do know a few people who have said, like, my grandma passed away and I really think that my grandma is, or part of my grandma is my child. So I guess it's not that. I mean, I think that is more of a human thing where it's the people you know and love, you like are kind of hoping so badly that a part of them will live on.
That's a little scary, actually.
Well, that's how I take it too. I think for them it's like hopeful and beautiful.
Yeah, your kid has this other person living inside them. Ah!
Right. I feel like that kind of cheapens the existence too. And then, like, are you with your kid like on vacation, and then you look in your kid's eyes and you're like, Grandma?
Right. How many?
Is that you in there?
And then how many generations compound in there?
Right. So that's why I kind of chalk that up to like wishful thinking, and like they love the beautiful story of, well, Grandma never got to meet little Jenny, but she's so similar. They both love smiling and laughing. So I think that's more of, again, people assigning attributes to a person. I like to think that we're all individuals, because who knows, maybe you and I then are reincarnated versions of some other people.
Uh-oh.
But which means, hey, who knows what that means? That opens a whole can of worms. But
oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely an interesting story. I'm always intrigued at like the besides the 2 girls died, and they have 2 twins, and they have the birthmarks, and the toys. That's all interesting. The fact that they sort of have what we'll call memories or knowledge of the car accident is what I find to be the most intriguing part of it all. We have to assume that the parents weren't talking about it, or that people weren't like, hey, didn't your sisters die in that car wreck? And then they're like, well, car wreck. Like if they had just their own innate knowledge of it, that is truly unexplainable.
Right. Now, in this story here, the thing that to me kind of sticks out as kind of curious and suspect is the father. And when you read about it, you read about how he was kind of preoccupied with reincarnation. And you then wonder how much of this was him trying to square the circle, as they say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If he was predisposed to think of it, and then, he might have even been subconsciously grooming them by
right.
Is he purposely putting these toys in front of this kid and being like, do you recognize these? You do. You took it.
Right.
How does she know? So, he definitely seems to be the X factor.
And also, you got to remember, kind of contrary to what I had said earlier, the girls, Jennifer and Jillian, were born a year after the car accident. So even though they would technically be far removed from it in terms of their age and they weren't alive when it happened, people were probably still talking about it around them for a while. You know what I'm saying? Like the parents probably talked about it. Other people probably talked about it. Their friends, friends. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So who knows what information they may have acquired. And then who also knows, if the father's the one reporting that they're talking about the accident, how good were those details really? You know what I mean? It's kind of like a game of telephone at that point.
Right, exactly. And I think a big plot hole that you mentioned is the father thinking about reincarnation, leaning that way. I'm sure he was kind of like I just said about people saying, oh, grandma's alive in you. It must be horrific to lose both of your daughters in one swoop. So I'm sure a part of him is saying deep down inside, you're back. I got you back. You weren't ripped away from me. So
right.
He could definitely have influenced their upbringing to have them leaning into that belief.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Quick offshoot, really not connected at all, but speaking of twins and car accidents, have you ever heard of Ursula and Sabina Eriksson?
I have not.
So they're these two Swedish twin sisters, pretty normal, lived a normal life, except for they had this incident of shared psychosis where they both sort of went on the run, started going across Europe, and they ended up on the highway where they were both acting very weird. They got kicked off a bus, and then there's video footage of this because the police came. They were on the highway jumping in front of cars, trying to get hit by cars.
It began when 40-year-old identical twins from Sweden wandered out onto one of Britain's busiest motorways. That single moment of madness triggered a sequence of events that ended in murder. The M6 is one of England's busiest motorways. Thousands of cars, buses and trucks use it every hour. But in May 2008, a day like no other. The women are 40-year-old identical twins from Sweden, Ursula and Sabina Eriksson. And at this point, they're seemingly calm and uninjured. As one highway worker stays with the sisters, his colleague tries to tell the police what's happened. But then, all hell breaks loose.
I'm not a doctor. She has been knocked down.
Is she the one that speaks English? Or the other one?
She's the one that...
Oh, no! Yes! Oh, Jesus!
For the second time, Ursula intentionally runs into the oncoming traffic and is run over by a truck. Then, her sister Sabina also makes a break for it, running onto the busy motorway, and she's hit by a car.
Mike Alpha, we need ambulance, senior officers to the scene, we've got 2 possible fatals.
And then the police come and are able to grab them, but one of them still throws themselves in front of a bus. And you can see her get hit by the bus. She lives. Then they both get evaluated in a psychiatric type hospital. One of them, I think, is then released and ends up stabbing and maybe even killing. Yeah, I think she kills someone. But regardless of all that, you can look into the story more if you'd like. But the shared psychosis of a delusional belief being transmitted from one person to another. And I know we've talked about twins and twin tuition. We did an episode on it. It's just interesting the connections people have. This one, the twin thing is not that big of a hook, but just thinking of twins and stories we don't touch on a lot, I was always fascinated by Ursula and Sabina and this sort of weird thing where they both kind of snapped and shared psychosis. I don't know, not really related besides the fact of the car. and them trying to get hit by cars and stuff. But, this is kind of a freewheeling episode. We're just throwing out topics. So if anybody's interested in that, I'm sure there are plenty of shows.
People do crazy stuff all the time, but it makes it that much worse if you're doing it with your twin. Just adds an extra layer of creepiness to it.
Yeah, and just both of them trying to get hit by cars. And they were both living normal lives. They met up and then they just sort of went on, just started getting weird behavior. They're traveling. They don't know where they're going. They're trying to commit suicide together. And it's well, they were normal and then they both snapped. So yeah, the fact that if one person kind of has a nervous breakdown or something, you're sort of oh, well, that's unfortunate. But two of them doing it is odd. And when they're twins, it just makes it that much more bizarre.
Indeed. All right.
And our final question comes from Phil, sent us a Facebook message asking, are you familiar with aura photography?
I recently saw this on a documentary that was talking about psychic vampirism. And there's actually two different types of psychic vampirism. So there's a legit psychological phenomenon in which people are psychic vampires in terms of not psychic like using mental powers, but they manipulate others in subtle ways, and they kind of drain their life force, but their energy. People can be tiring to be around, and these are people who purposefully do that, and they kind of, their relationships are all about kind of taking things from other people and manipulating them and making them feel bad and things like that. So that's what psychic vampirism is in terms of psychology. There's another phenomenon that has the same name, which is psychic vampirism, which is literally where people believe someone's a psychic vampire and they can steal your energy. And in this documentary, they talked about it, and they use aura photography, or what's called Kirlian photography, to kind of make their point. So what it is in the documentary, they took two people's hands and they put it in this device and they photograph it, and one of them is supposedly a psychic vampire and the other is not. And the glow or aura, which shows up in the images, you can kind of see transfers from one to the other between photographs. This all dates back to the early 1900s, 1939. There was a guy named Simon Kirlian, and he and his wife were taking photographs of people in a hospital, and they kind of noticed that there was this patient who was receiving medical treatment, and as they kind of developed the photos, they noticed that there was this kind of aura in it, and they kind of went with that. And this was kind of popular in the 1930s, so not really the same time as spiritualism and things like that.
Right.
Where people would take, you take a picture of someone and you would see this glow around it, and it was oh, there's your aura. There's proof that there's an aura. It reminds me, or a soul kind of, and it reminds me of kind of that experiment where the guy was weighing people upon their death to see that the soul had weight.
Yes.
Kind of similar.
Yes.
I don't know. Fits in the same file for me. And then this is actually making a comeback now. There's a lot of people who are doing this kind of stuff. Is sort of the New Age movement kind of comes back with healing crystals and Reiki and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not going to say that those are not real or anything like that, because that's not what I'm talking about right now. But with the aura photography, because I don't know enough about Reiki or crystals to really make a statement on them. I haven't really experienced either. But with the Kirlian photography, what I can say is that it uses electrical devices to take the photograph. So it's kind of you put your hand inside this thing or whatever you're photographing, and it has a glass plate, which I guess is almost similar to a photocopier, that glass that you use to focus the image. And then there's a plate underneath it that generates an electric current.
You stick your butt on that thing.
So what I read was that it's pretty much it's almost like putting a filter on the photograph that will generate different outcomes. So we should all be familiar with that in this day and age with all the photo apps that are out there now. You put a filter on something, you can generate all kinds of crazy imagery. And even back then, it was kind of I guess the way you expose the film and things like that. Scientists were saying well, it depends how hot your hand was or how hard you were pressing down and things like that. So there were different things that would affect the photograph, and also how it was developed. I think if you developed it like a normal photograph, you wouldn't really get that same aura effect. So to me, it's like highly, highly manipulated. I mean, even now you have like the Apple iPads, like the old ones going way back. You could do like that. It's not really a thermal camera, but it looks and it sees light and it colors it red. So like this is like, I don't know. I feel like this is kind of very an easy one to kind of dispel, as this kind of stuff is kind of very prevalent in technology today.
Yeah. There's a lot of things. One that's interesting to me, I was just thinking recently about energy vampires, more in the sense you were saying, where it's like when I go to a party, I'm like a reverse vampire. Everybody's there. I get excited. I get hyped up.
Right.
Then everybody else gets hyped up. So we're all feeding off the energy of the room and being with people at the same time. Like you had said, if somebody, I know one woman who is like just always complaining. Her Facebook statuses are always complaining every time you see her. It's like draining. She is a vampire, at least energy-wise, because she's moping around. Life sucks. This happened. And it's like, she's just gloomy. And then she just brings me down. So I think that definition of a psychic vampire is definitely true. And as far as manipulating photos, like you were just saying, it reminded me of spirit photography. There's the famous picture with Abe Lincoln, with Mary Todd Lincoln, and he's behind her. And those were obviously photos that were just being developed in a way where it was an image on an image. I think
Houdini made that one, actually, to prove that spirit photography was fake.
Hey, I'll buy it. He was always out there, but I feel like it could definitely fall in that. Photos, videos, very easy to manipulate, especially nowadays with special effects, Photoshop. Even an amateur can make something that looks real. Tough to tell. I did look up the Kirlian photography, and it says what it actually is it's capturing the phenomenon of electrical coronal discharges. What the hell's a corona discharge? It's not when you drink a lot of Corona and then take a leak, I'll tell you that much. What it is it's a electrical discharge brought on by the ionization of a fluid, such as air, surrounding a conductor that is electrically charged. So we'll definitely post some photos at facebook.com/thebrothersmysterium. But it looks like there is some sort of electric aura. You can do it around coins, hands, people. So it could just be the sort of charged ions is what the photo is grasping. As far as getting, I think it's hard to photograph souls. I don't think we've invented that type of camera yet to get if someone was dying or a soul, if there's a psychic vampire draining your energy. Can we really photograph that? I have my doubts.
As do I.
That's what I got to say about that. So that's where we landed on all those questions. We want to thank all the listeners, number one, for listening, and number two, for engaging with us, sending us your questions. As always, the show is built on firsthand experiences, your questions, your thoughts, topics you throw at us. So as we said in the beginning, please don't only like us, rate, review us, tell your friends about us, spread the word, spread the love, spread the Mysterium, but never hesitate to reach out to us if you have an experience, if you hear the hum, if you have a paranormal experience that you want to share, you have questions about something you went through, there's a legend you want explored, whatever it might be, you want advice on your personal dating life, we do it all. thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com, facebook.com/thebrothersmysterium, @Mysterium Bros, Twitter, Instagram, thebrothersmysterium.com, our home base, a great spot to reach us. So we want to thank you for your questions and thank you for listening to us. The clips you heard in this episode come from the AMC television series Better Call Saul, Season 3, Episode 5, Chicanery. The report on the Erickson twins comes from 60 Minutes Australia. The clip you heard about the magnetic Georgian man comes from ODN, On Demand News. And the clip you heard of James Randi debunking a magnetic man was from his MySpace page, originally from an Asian television show. And as always, our theme song is performed by the band The Nevergrin. If you want to get in touch with us, The Brothers Mysterium, email us at thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com. We will get back to you. Hit us up on Twitter or Instagram. We are at Mysterium Bros. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/thebrothersmysterium. And thebrothersmysterium.com is our official website. So thank you for listening to us.